Survival in the modern world isn't just about facing the wild. Sometimes the greatest dangers are invisible, lurking in the digital shadows. For the oil and gas company MOG, this reality hit hard on March 30th, 2024. The day began like any other, but in the pre-dawn quiet, a silent predator was already on the move. At precisely 4 o'clock in the morning, the first sign of trouble emerged. The control room, the company's nerve center, reported a critical failure. Shared area services were down. This wasn't a simple glitch, it was the opening shot in a battle for the company's very survival, a digital ambush that no one saw coming. Out on a remote offshore platform, miles from the nearest shore, the world can feel isolated. But technology connects even the most distant outposts. It was here, amidst the hum of machinery and the vast expanse of the sea, that an IT supervisor was about to make a chilling discovery. At 5:30 in the morning, he was the first to realize this was no ordinary system failure. The digital landscape he was tasked with protecting was showing signs of a hostile takeover. Something was fundamentally wrong, and every instinct told him this was a deliberate act of aggression. The situation demanded immediate action, a clear head, and the courage to face an unknown enemy. The initial signs were confusing, a puzzle of disconnected errors and failing systems. But as the IT supervisor began his investigation, a pattern started to form. It was like tracking a dangerous animal through a dense jungle. The clues were subtle but pointed towards a sophisticated aggressor. He systematically checked the core infrastructure, starting with the Buri Hyper-V server, the heart of their local operations. The server was unresponsive, its vital functions crippled. It was clear this wasn't a hardware malfunction, this was a targeted strike, designed to cause maximum disruption and chaos across the entire network. As the sun began to rise, casting a pale light over the platform, the gravity of the situation became terrifyingly clear. The supervisor knew he was on the front line of a major incident. He had to move fast, to gather evidence and alert the wider team before the damage became irreversible. Every minute counted. The digital predator was still out there, potentially moving deeper into their systems. He had to sound the alarm, to rally the troops for the fight that lay ahead. The quiet morning had been shattered, replaced by the stark reality of a full-blown cyber attack. With the initial alert raised, the MOG team scrambled into action. The time for confusion was over. Now was the time for methodical investigation. By 6 o'clock in the morning, the team began a deep dive into the afflicted systems, focusing their efforts on the crippled BOHIP-01 server. What they found confirmed their worst fears. The virtual machines, the digital workhorses of the company, had been sabotaged. The path to their virtual hard disks had been deliberately altered, severing the connection and rendering them completely inaccessible. It was a digital decapitation, and then they saw it. A text file, a digital calling card left behind by the attackers. It was a ransom note. The message was clear and brutal. This was a ransomware attack. The enemy now had a name. They had deployed a vicious strain of malware known as Virtus, a new and reportedly unencryptable variant. The ransom note was the final piece of the puzzle, transforming the incident from a technical problem into a hostage situation. The attackers had seized the company's most valuable asset, its data, and were demanding a price for its return. The IT team documented the evidence meticulously, knowing that every detail would be crucial in the fight to reclaim their digital territory and understand the enemy's tactics. Digging deeper into the server logs, the team uncovered how the breach had occurred. The attackers hadn't smashed through the gates. They had walked in through the front door using stolen keys. They had compromised a high-level MOG Active Directory Administrator account, admin1949, giving them godlike access to the entire network. Their first move, logged at 4:18 in the morning, was a classic act of a seasoned intruder. They cleared the event logs on the main servers, attempting to erase their footprints and cover their tracks. This was not the work of amateurs. This was a professional, well-orchestrated operation. With administrator privileges, the attackers moved with devastating speed and efficiency. Their next step was to disable the company's primary defense, the Kaspersky antivirus software on the servers. With the digital immune system neutralized, they were free to deploy their ransomware payload without resistance, encrypting the virtual machines one by one. On other, less critical computers, they left only the ransom note, a psychological tactic designed to spread fear and confusion. The attack was comprehensive, spreading like a virus to almost every MOG site, leaving a trail of digital destruction in its wake. By 7:30 in the morning, the full scale of the disaster was apparent. The ransomware had swept through the company's network, encrypting Hyper-V virtual machines at every major site. Buri, Subrata, Wafa, A100, all had fallen victim. The only potential exception was the El Feel site, but they couldn't take any chances. The IT supervisor, coordinating with ICT management, made a critical command decision. They had to stop the bleeding. The priority shifted from investigation to containment. They had to cut off the infection, to isolate the compromised parts of the network to prevent the malware from spreading any further. It was time to build a digital firebreak. The first decisive action was to neutralize the attacker's primary weapon. At 8:10 in the morning, a directive was issued to remove all IT domain administrator accounts from the domain admin group. This effectively locked the intruders out, stripping them of the high-level privileges they had used to wreak so much havoc. It was a bold move, like changing the locks in the middle of a burglary. But it was absolutely necessary to regain control of their own environment. They were taking back the keys to the kingdom, severing the attackers' access and preventing them from launching a second wave of attacks. Next came the company-wide lockdown protocol. Between 8:37 and 9:53 in the morning, the IT supervisor issued a series of urgent instructions to every site. The order was simple and absolute. Media group, close-up of urgent stamped message, simple written instructions on whiteboard stock distribute _equally, isolate your networks immediately. Disconnect from the main corporate network to create self-contained islands. Shut down all Hyper-V and file servers to halt the encryption process in its tracks. And finally, turn off every single employee PC. The company was effectively going dark, a drastic but essential measure to starve the ransomware of new targets and give the IT team the breathing room they needed to assess the damage and plan their counteroffensive. While some sites were completely crippled, there were small glimmers of hope. Reports from the Wafa site suggested that their end-user PCs had remained safe, possibly due to a more robust version of Kaspersky that the attackers had failed to disable on those machines. As the lockdown was enforced, the team began the painstaking process of checking for infections. They armed themselves with Kaspersky Rescue Disk tools, specialized instruments designed to scan and clean systems from a safe external environment. The battle for containment was on, a race against time to save what could be saved. As night fell on the 30th of March, the immediate chaos of the attack began to subside, replaced by the grim task of recovery. The team had confirmed that the Virtus ransomware was, as feared, unencryptable. Paying the ransom was not an option. They had to rebuild from the ground up. At 10 o'clock in the evening, the Buri team, in coordination with their counterparts in Gaza, began to formulate a recovery plan. The first step was a symbolic one. They would format the original infected server, BuHip01. Wiping it clean was the only way to be certain that no trace of the malware remained. It was the beginning of a long and arduous journey back to normality. The next morning, the recovery plan kicked into high gear. A full damage assessment began, with teams at each site meticulously checking every server and workstation to create a comprehensive list of infected systems. This inventory was critical for prioritizing the rebuild. At 9 o'clock in the morning on March 31st, a new, completely isolated server was installed at Buri to serve as the new Hyper-V host. The strategy was to build a new, clean domain from scratch. This new domain would then be synchronized with a healthy domain controller in Gaza, allowing them to begin the slow process of restoring critical services like the SQL server and file server from the last known good backups. This devastating attack served as a brutal lesson in the realities of modern cybersecurity. The primary takeaway was the critical vulnerability posed by compromised administrator accounts. Stronger password policies, mandatory multi-factor authentication, and stricter controls on privileged access are no longer optional. They are essential for survival. Furthermore, the incident highlighted the importance of network segmentation. Had the networks been better isolated from each other, the attack might have been contained to a single site instead of spreading across the entire enterprise like wildfire. These weren't just recommendations, they were battle-proven necessities. In the end, survival comes down to preparation and vigilance. Simple steps can make a world of difference. Regular security awareness training for all staff is crucial, teaching them to spot phishing attempts and practice good digital hygiene. It is vital to keep all systems and software, especially antivirus solutions, constantly updated to protect against the latest threats. And most importantly, having a robust, tested and offline backup and recovery plan is the ultimate safety net. In the digital wilderness, you must always be prepared for the worst, because the predators are always watching, waiting for a moment of weakness.